Hey guys, it's Chala and welcome back. Today's card is part of the Scrap and Stamp 30-day Facebook challenge, so head on over and check that out. I'll link everything down below. So here are the Lawn Fawn products I'm going to be using. This pull tab die, the Fairy Friends, some stitched hillside borders, the circle dies. I think those are from MFT. But yeah, I'm just going to be using some stuff that I had already die cut out and or stamped out in my stash, and I thought it would make a really fun card. So these are the hillside grass borders that are already die cut out from Lawn Fawn. I was going to use them on another project, ended up not using them, so when I took a look at the pieces that I had, it reminded me of a card that I saw a couple years ago on, I think, the My Favorite Things site, where they did the double loop slider card, and it had a little woodland critter kind of popping out of a hole in the tree, and I thought that would be really fun to do with these little fairies. So the first thing I'm doing is adding some dimension to these die cut pieces with some distress ink, and the colors I used, I believe, are the Mowed Lawn, Shabby Shutters, and Forest Moss. Again, I'll link everything over at the Scrap and Stamp blog, and you can get there by checking the link out down below. So adding some distress ink to your die cuts actually just gives it a bit deeper of a look, a little more realistic look, giving it depth and dimension, and it's just something really simple and easy to do that will just kind of add to your project and make it pop. So just quickly using my Picket Fence blending brush to add those distress inks in, and you can see that it is already adding the lights and shadows to it, so that it gives it a better look. I'll end up layering these two pieces onto each other, but I do want to get this distress ink on here so it does have some time to kind of dry and set up. Now that wood stamp piece that you see on the left there, I don't remember where I got that stamp from, to tell you the truth, but there are lots of stamps or embossing folders that you can use to get the same kind of look, so definitely head over to Scrap and Stamp and check out what they have for wood grain. I know there's a few products there. And so with that one, it's already cut down to a smaller rectangle size, so it's not quite an A2 size, but I'll also be cutting it down more to create the tree. So again, just finishing off these hillside borders with adding that distress ink. And if I remember, I think that wood piece, I think I used the twig distress ink to stamp that with, but it's just a brown on brown. So yeah, so we'll quickly get started on the next part of our card. So for the background, I have an A2 size piece that I cut to the same size as this wood panel, and I did some ink blending with some broken china, and what I want to do is we're going to be adhering our elements onto that blue distress inked piece. That's going to be our sky, our background. And I use the hillside border there to cut out kind of the shape of a tree, and then I'm going to add the grass pieces, sorry, words are hard right now, the grass pieces to that, but I don't want it to overhang too far underneath the tree because that's where I'm going to be putting the notch in the slider portion. So again, I'm just kind of finding the bits that I really like, and I cut them out with the stitched border frame there just to give the consistency of that look, and then I can line them up and figure out how much I need to cut off and where I want to adhere them down. Again, I don't want them too far underneath that tree because that's where the slider mechanism is going to be, and I don't want it to add too much bulk to the project. So I'm just going to make some pencil lines here on where I want to cut them down, and then I can go ahead and trim them up with my scissors. Alright, once I have those adhered down, I use some GK Connect glue for that. I can work on making the notch for the slider portion of my card. And so I want to make sure that the two pieces, the tree and the card base, have the notch in the exact same place. I don't want to run them through together because I don't feel like that would cut through both pieces all at once, and I don't want to risk it, so I'm going to just cut them one at a time, but making sure that I get it lined up perfectly. So what I'm trying to do here is just figure out where I want that notch to be. Now I do have it upside down right now. I will fix that, I will turn it over, otherwise it will cut into my card. So here I'm just turning it over and lining it up onto the bottom of the card. And then I can adhere that down with some low tack tape and run it through my die cutting machine. Alright, so what I did is I made sure that I got the die cut notch exactly the same on both pieces, and how I did that is I just laid one over top of the other and replaced the notch in there, and then removed the tree piece and taped down the die cut notch onto the back panel piece and then ran it through. So it worked perfectly, it lined up perfectly. Alright, so now what I want to do is I need to get the pull tab portion of our piece. And so before the pull tab piece, I want to actually work on the little hole for the fairy to go through. Getting ahead of myself here. So this is the little hole that I want to cut out. I want to make sure that it's going to be big enough for my little fairy to pop through. And so I'm going to actually just die cut that from that tree piece only. Okay, we're not adhering that tree piece down yet, so just putting some washi tape on there to hold it as I run it through my die cut machine. And then again, this is where that little fairy is going to pop out of. So I'll go ahead and make sure it's in the place that I like, and then I can run it through my die cutting machine. After I've done that, I want to adhere down just the circle part that we cut out. So if you notice on the back of that tree piece, there is no adhesive on the base of the tree, just that circle. So I use that low tack tape to hold the circle in place to make sure that I get it exactly where I need it to go, and then I pull it off. And this is where the little pull tab is going to come in now. I want to create our track. So it's got to be wide enough that it's hidden behind that tree, and then enough so that we can get a piece of plastic in there to work as our pulley or our belt mechanism. So what I'm trying to do here is just line it up underneath that circle. When you do this, this is again the little notch from the, I think the Let's Toast pull tab set as well, and I want to make sure that it's lined up on the left as well as it is nice and horizontal so that the plastic can pull through properly. So I'm going to be cutting one notch at a time, and I want to make sure that both of them line up perfectly on the left as well as both of them are horizontal to each other. So there's the first one that I ran through, and now again I'm using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station here to help me with this, to keep everything in place. That magnetic ruler is really handy to hold the cardstock down so it's not moving around, as well as give me a straight edge to work with to get that die in place. The only tricky part is it is magnetic, and so is the die, so I have to kind of hold it in place and make sure it's not getting stuck to the ruler. Again, just adhering some low tack tape over top and then running it through the machine. Right, so now you can see that we have both notches, and I gave myself a little bit of a challenge here as those notches are fairly close together, so I have a limited space to work with my image. So thankfully she fits inside those two, between those two notches, and will be hidden nicely, but something to keep in mind, you don't want too big of an image. I do have her, I'll have her peeking out just a little bit though. Alright, so the next part is to get that pull tab piece, and this is the pull tab mechanism from the Let's Toast, and I'm going to use it a little differently than what it's meant for. I want the pull portion and I want the little tab it comes with, but I don't need those flaps, so I'll end up die cutting that through the leftover piece of the tree and then trimming it down, and I'll show you that in a bit here. I want to jump ahead to the plastic mechanism that will act as our belt or our pulley system. I had an art project a while ago, and I had some leftover tarp that had just sitting in my garbage, so I'm literally just cut a hunk of it off and trimmed it down to about 1.5 inches, I believe there, and I've got a fairly good length right now, but I'll end up trimming it down. You're going to feed this through the front side of your card panel here, so both ends are going to go through the front side, so that smooth portion is on the front. And then what we'll do is we'll loop it around to the back, and that's where you get that loop slider card from. So we're going to you can see that I can sort of move it back and forth, but we'll loop it over here. And you want just enough overhang so that it will adhere to the other piece, but we don't want it too tight, because if it's too tight it won't move smoothly. So I didn't cut off enough. I should have cut off more, but that's okay. I'm using some Be Creative tape, this really nice strong adhesive tape, to adhere those two pieces together. And then I know it's not going to come apart. I really like this adhesive for projects that you're going to pull or push on. Then you know it's your project's going to stay together. So just removing that liner paper and gently just laying it over top. I'm not pulling tight at all, I'm just laying it. And as you can see there, I could have definitely cut that piece down a little further. You want to make sure that that smooth part is to the front. And now we'll move on. You can see I've added my little fairies and elements there. We're going to move on to the putting together of the pull tab portion. So I've cut it out there from that extra wood cardstock grain. And then I'm going to adhere that little arrow that shows down. And I'm going to do that with my Gina K glue. I like this because it gives you enough time to wiggle it around if you don't have it quite straight, and it's a very strong adhesive. And adding just enough so it doesn't squish out that little triangle. We'll fold that tab over. And then this is the piece that we will end up adhering to that plastic, but we adhere it actually to the back. Alright, so that's coming together nicely. You can see that we'll adhere it on here. And I want to line it up nicely on the bottom. And here's where I kind of made a mistake. So I want to make sure I get the adhesive in the right place. But you don't want to use as much adhesive as I did. You only want one little strip. So the first little strip I placed down here, that's enough. That's all you want. Because if you adhere the adhesive all over that plastic piece, it's not going to move anywhere. And I learned that really quickly, and you'll see here in a minute. So add that adhesive there, and that's it. Don't add the second piece, because that's just too much. When you go to pull it, it has nowhere for that plastic to move because you had adhered it fully all over. So I end up removing that and fixing it a little bit later. But this is kind of the bit of a tedious portion of this. It's actually not all that bad. But once you get it figured out and you've made one, the rest will go very quickly. So here I adhere it down, and then I'm going to trim off that extra piece. And this is where I figure out, I'm like, that's not moving. Why isn't it moving? Because I had put too much adhesive on. So I will pull that off, and I have to think about it for a while. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So I moved on to working with my little fairy element, and I want her to, how am I going to have her slide up? And I know that she needs to be adhered here, but how am I going to do that? What's the best way to do that? And the best way is I needed to actually pop her up with a little bit of an acetate strip. So I cut a little wee piece of acetate strip down and adhered it to the back of her. So there it is there. I actually have to trim it down a lot more. I cut way too big of a piece. And so I'll just adhere it to the back of her again with that nice strong score tape. I'm going to make sure I get enough on her. I'm going to remove that release paper. This is where these little reverse tweezers really come in handy for this sort of thing. Then I adhere that acetate, and then that will help. It'll adhere to the plastic, but it will pop her up just enough to make her move. So what I need to do now is remove that little extra piece of adhesive, now that I've thought about it and realized what I did. And when I adhere the fairy, I want to have the mechanism in the pulled down position, and that'll show me exactly where I need to adhere her to get her in the best place. Then once you have her adhered down and she's moving up and down how you want her, you want to go ahead and grab some foam tape. Now we need to create a track for the slider mechanism. I also created a little bit of a stopper. I didn't want this to get pushed up too far, so I created a stopper at the top there, and then we're going to create the tracks on the side, and that stops that pull tab piece from moving left to right and going all catty-wonky on us. So just trimming this down. You want to make sure you're not adhering adhesive to that plastic belt piece. Alright, so you can see that I'm literally just putting that adhesive on the bottom portion just to stop the wiggle of that foam tape. I'm using some anti-static powder there just in case that adhesive is a little bit sticky on the sides. I don't want it to stick the pull tab portion, so just adding a little bit of that anti-static powder will help it move smoothly. You can also add a little bit on the back side onto the plastic paper itself, inside the little tracks there, to give it a little lubricant, if you will, and it'll help things slide smoothly. That's what I do as well with my Magic Picture Changer cards. I use that as well. So then once I've got the back all taped up with some foam tape, making sure that it's kind of all over the back except for where that mechanism moves. It gives stability to your card. You don't want any bowing or gaping in it. So there's just that very small area that doesn't have it on. I'm also adding foam tape to that tree piece, again making sure that you don't add anything in the middle there where your slider mechanism is going to be, or where that track of the plastic moves. And then I can adhere that down, and now we can see that our little fairy pops up and down nicely. It works perfectly. So the next portion is adhering this now to our card base. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now I'm just removing the release paper off the back of that foam tape, and I'm going to adhere it down onto my card base. You will see I do some extra stamping to this card at the end. When you're adhering this down, make sure that you hold that little pull tab piece steady there, just at the bottom while you adhere it down, and that just makes sure it doesn't come loose and stick to the foam tape there. Alright, so as I was saying, I did add some extra stamping to this card. I highly recommend you make sure you get all your stamping done before you adhere all the foam tape. It was an afterthought for me, but look at that. Look how cute that is. A little fairy popping up to say hello to her friend. Yeah, just adorable. Again, if it's not sliding smoothly, if you can carefully remove that tree piece and add some of that anti-static powder, that will likely help. Or you might have adhered your little track too tight, or your belt too tight. Adding a wink of Stella to the wings of these fairies, because everybody likes a little bit of sparkle in their life. And then I also want to stamp a sentiment on the inside of the card. And I really like the sentiments that Lawn Fawn has with all their stamp sets. They coordinate so well. Look at that sparkle. Love it. So cute. And you can barely see that little acetate piece, so you don't even notice it there. It works perfectly. So yeah, so the sentiment that I wanted to use was have a magical day. And like I said, the sentiments that Lawn Fawn has with their stamp sets are absolutely adorable. They always coordinate so well. So I'm going to use my Stamp Perfect for this. It just helps me get, at this point, I really don't want to screw up on the sentiment portion of it, so I want to make sure I have the ability to double stamp if I need to. And I'll go ahead and use my absolute favorite ink, which if you follow me, you know it's that Nocturne Versa fine black ink. Just, it's amazing. Usually I get it in one go. I rarely have to double stamp anything, so I've got that all stamped down and it looks fantastic. No need to restamp. So have a magical day. Like I said, other than the adding of some white heat embossing with the little heart here, some conversation hearts, that's a Lawn Fawn set as well. Link everything over at the Scrap and Stamp blog, so make sure you check that out. I really like how this card turned out. It was really cute. It was a fun way to use up some items I already had ready to go. And I love that I could use a ton of Lawn Fawn products to put this together. I just kind of looked at what I had and figured out what I could combine together for die sets and stamps to make this really, really fun fairy card. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you head over to Scrap and Stamp Facebook challenge page to share your creations. Definitely take part in the challenge. We love to see what you create. Here are some other videos, and if you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks so much, and send someone some love today. Take care.